It's just a coffee spill. You work from home, not in a hospital. People act like remote work is some kind of sacred career. That was my brother's voice. Flat, dismissive, already halfway back to the couch before his wife even finished knocking my laptop off the kitchen counter. And that was the exact moment I decided I was done. My name is Ryan Cole, and I want you to understand something about me before I tell you what I did. I am not an angry person. I have never once raised my voice in that house. Not when my brother moved back in and turned my old room into a gym without asking. Not when his wife repainted the kitchen without telling my mother. Not even when they let their dog chew through my headset cables twice in the same month. I paid for replacements both times and said nothing. That was just me. That was always just me. I had been living in my own apartment for 4 years, but I still came home on weekends to help. Dad's back had been bad since the warehouse accident 3 years ago. Mom didn't drive after dark anymore. My brother had moved back with his wife about a year prior, and in theory, that should have made things easier for my parents. In practice, it meant I was still the one fixing the gutters, still the one calling the insurance company, still the one covering the difference when my dad's disability check came up short. I worked in cloud infrastructure for a mid-sized fintech firm. Not glamorous, but it paid well. Very well. My brother knew the number. He'd seen my W-2 the one time I left it on the kitchen table by accident, and after that, he never quite looked at me the same way. There was something in his eyes when money came up. Something I chose to ignore for a long time. That Saturday, I had driven over to help my dad install a new water heater. I brought my work bag because I had a critical deployment window opening at 2 in the afternoon and I needed to monitor the rollout remotely. Everything was going fine. Dad and I finished the installation by noon. Mom made lunch. My brother and his wife were somewhere in the back of the house with their 2 kids, loud and unbothered, the way they always were. I set up at the kitchen table. Laptop open, external monitor plugged into the dock, coffee to my left, everything organized the way I needed it. I had 40 minutes before the deployment started and I just needed quiet. That was all I asked for. Just 40 minutes of quiet at a table that had been in my family for 22 years. My sister-in-law walked in with a full mug of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other, not looking at anything except the screen she was scrolling through. Her elbow caught the edge of my monitor cable. The cable pulled. The laptop came with it. The mug went sideways and the coffee went directly into the open keyboard before the laptop hit the floor. She looked at it. She looked at me. She said, "Oh, it fell." Not "I'm sorry." Not "Are you okay?" Just, "Oh, it fell." Like gravity had made a minor clerical error. I picked it up immediately. The screen was flickering. The keyboard was soaked. I could hear the fan grinding in a way it had never ground before. I grabbed my charger, tried to power it down properly, but the screen went black on its own after about 8 seconds and it didn't come back on. I sat there holding a dead machine that had my monitoring dashboard open, my deployment credentials cached, and a direct channel to the production server that was now going live without me watching it. My brother walked in about 30 seconds later. He looked at the laptop on the table, at the coffee pooled under it, at my face, and he said what I told you at the beginning. "It's just a coffee spill. You work from home, not in a hospital." I said, very carefully, that I had a live deployment starting in 38 minutes and that laptop had my remote access credentials. He shrugged. "Can't you just use your phone? I want you to understand that my company's infrastructure rollout was not something I could monitor on a phone screen. I also want you to understand that the spill had gotten into the motherboard, not just the keyboard. I knew this because I had built enough systems to recognize the sound of a fan trying to compensate for a short, and also because when I carefully pried up the bottom panel right there at the kitchen table, I could see the liquid had reached the logic board. This was not a screen replacement situation. This was not a keyboard swap. The machine was gone. My mother came in and looked at the whole scene and said the thing I think I will hear in my head for the rest of my life. She said, "Honey, accidents happen, you know how she gets when she's distracted." I asked who was going to replace it. My brother leaned against the door frame and crossed his arms. "You have a good job, Ryan, you can afford another one." She didn't do it on purpose. I looked at my sister-in-law. She was already back on her phone. I did not yell. I did not curse. I picked up my bag, put the dead laptop in it, and walked out to my car. I sat in the driveway and called my team lead to explain the situation. He was decent about it. He and another engineer covered the monitoring window. No major incidents. The deployment went clean, but I sat in that car for a long time after the call ended. Not because of the laptop. Not even because of the deployment. I sat there because of how fast they had all looked away. How automatic it was. How none of them, not one person in that house, had said his name is Ryan and he deserves an apology. I drove to a Best Buy and bought a new machine on the spot. $1,200 on my credit card, and while I was standing at the register, I made a decision I had been avoiding for about 3 years. I was going to stop. Not dramatically. Not with a speech. I was just going to stop doing the things I had been doing quietly for so long that everyone had forgotten I was doing them at all. The first thing I did when I got back to my apartment was pull up my bank's autopay dashboard. My parents were on my cell phone plan. My brother and his wife were on it too. I had added them all 4 years ago when my dad's fixed income made it hard to cover the family plan they'd had since I was in high school. I had just rolled them over to mine. Never made a big deal about it. It had become invisible. The way things do when you pay for them long enough. I removed my brother and his wife first. Then I went into the streaming accounts. I paid for 2 services that the whole family used. I checked the last login logs. My brother's wife had watched something the night before. My brother had been on one of them just that morning, an hour before the coffee incident. I changed the passwords on both and set them to personal use only. Then I sat down with a notepad, the old-fashioned kind, and I started writing down everything I had bought for that house in the last 4 years. Not to feel sorry for myself, just because I needed to see the number. The couch in the living room. I had bought it when my parents' old one finally gave out, 2.5 years ago. $1,040. My dad's new recliner after the back surgery, his TV, the big one in the den, the one they watched every night. The kitchen appliances, the new ones, the microwave and the coffee maker and the stand mixer my mother had wanted for Christmas 2 years in a row before I just bought it. The washer and dryer set in the garage that replaced the ones that flooded the laundry room. All of it. My credit card, my debit card, my name on the receipts. I had the receipts. I keep everything. But before I did anything with that list, I needed to handle the professional problem first. Here is the thing no one in my family knew. My company had a distributed backup protocol that ran silently in the background on all employee devices connected to the corporate VPN. Every commit, every configuration file, every credential bundle I had access to was mirrored to a secure partition on our company servers in real time. It was an IT security policy, not something I had set up personally. I had forgotten about it the way you forget about seatbelts. It was just always there. When I logged into the company portal from my new machine that evening and authenticated through the security token on my phone, everything was there. My entire working environment, restored in under 20 minutes, the deployment logs, the monitoring dashboard, my project files, all of it. The laptop was gone, but the work was untouched. I sat back and looked at the screen and felt something settle in my chest. Not relief exactly. More like clarity. They had not actually taken anything from me. They had just shown me who they were, clearly, without ambiguity, for the first time in a long time. I worked through Sunday and into Monday morning, caught up on the deployment notes, wrote my incident report, and then I did something I had been putting off for 11 months. I called the recruiter back. Her name was Diane, and she worked for a company called Meridian Systems, a direct competitor to the firm where I had been employed for 3 years. Meridian had reached out to me the previous spring through LinkedIn. I had taken the first call, been impressed, and then gone quiet because I felt guilty about leaving a stable job that had treated me reasonably well. Diane had checked in twice after that. I had been polite but non-committal. I called her at 8:45 Monday morning. She picked up on the second ring. We talked for an hour and 20 minutes. Meridian was offering a senior infrastructure role, full remote, 15% above my current salary, with an equity package that vested over 3 years. I told Diane I was interested. She said she would fast-track the final interview. By Thursday, I had the offer letter in my inbox. I did not accept it immediately. I sat with it. Not because I was uncertain, but because I wanted to be sure I was making the decision for the right reasons, for my career, not just because I was angry. By Friday morning I was sure. I signed the letter. And then, only then, did I go back to the house. I had called ahead and told my mother I needed to pick up some things I had left in the garage. She said, of course, come by whenever. She did not mention the laptop. She did not mention Sunday. She had already moved on. The way my family always moved on, which was to say they moved forward without looking back at what they had left behind. My brother's car was in the driveway when I arrived. I had counted on that. I walked in through the side door. My mother was in the kitchen. My brother was on the couch with the remote in his hand, watching something on the TV I had bought. I sat down at the kitchen table across from my mother and I said, I want to talk about what happened on Saturday. She set down her dish towel. She said, Ryan, I already told her she should be more careful with other people's things. I said. She knocked a $1,200 work machine into a pool of coffee and your response was that accidents happen. My mother pressed her lips together. My brother unmuted the TV in the other room. I said, I've been covering this family's phone plan for 4 years. I bought that TV he's watching. I bought the couch he's sitting on. My mother said I didn't have to do any of that. I said, no, I didn't. And as of this week, I'm not. She went very still. I told her calmly that I had already removed my brother and his wife from my phone plan. I told her I had changed the passwords on the streaming accounts. I told her that the auto-pay for the incidentals I had been covering was being redirected to my own savings account starting the following billing cycle. My brother appeared in the doorway. He had heard enough. His voice was tight when he said, "Are you seriously doing this over a laptop?" I looked at him. I said, "I'm doing this because when your wife destroyed my equipment and your response was to tell me I could afford to replace it, nobody in this room asked if I was okay." "Not one of you." He said, "You're being dramatic?" I said, "I know that's how it looks from where you're standing." Then I walked past him, down the hall to the garage, and I started photographing everything on my list with the receipts pulled up side by side on my phone. Every item I had paid for. Every appliance. Every piece of furniture with my name on the original transaction. I was not going to take it that day. I needed movers for some of it, and I needed to be methodical, not reactive. But I documented everything. My brother followed me to the garage doorway. He said if I touched anything in that house he would call the police. I told him to go ahead, because I had documentation proving ownership of every item I planned to remove, and he was welcome to explain to a responding officer why he was living rent-free in a house where his younger brother had been quietly furnishing the living room for the better part of 4 years. He didn't say anything after that. I left. That evening, I arranged for a moving company to come the following Saturday. I sent my mother a text that same night. I listed every item by room with the purchase amount and date. I told her I was not doing this to hurt her. I was doing it because I had spent a long time confusing obligation with love, and I was finally learning the difference. I told her the appliances in the kitchen were hers to keep, that I wasn't going to leave her without a working stove, that I still loved her. But the TV, the den furniture, the washer and dryer, all of it was coming back. She called me 4 times. I did not answer that night. The moving company arrived at 10 on Saturday morning. My brother's car was gone. I found out later from my mother that he had left early to avoid being there, which told me everything I needed to know about how he actually felt about the situation. My sister-in-law was there, standing in the living room with her arms crossed, watching 2 movers carefully wrap the couch in moving blankets. She said, "You can't be serious." I handed her a printed copy of the itemized list with the purchase receipts attached. I said, "Everything on this list was purchased by me and never reimbursed. I'm exercising my right to retrieve my property." She said, "Where are we supposed to sit?" I said, "I'm not sure, but I'm confident you'll figure something out." She called my brother. I could hear his voice through the phone from 6 feet away. He was loud, the way he always got when he felt cornered. She kept saying he needs to do something, somebody needs to do something. I watched the movers carry the TV out the front door and I felt the quietest, steadiest kind of satisfaction I had ever experienced in my life. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway the whole time. She did not try to stop the movers. She looked like she was trying very hard not to cry. And I felt the familiar pull to go to her, to say forget it, leave it, it's fine, I'm fine. I had answered that pull every single time for as long as I could remember. I let it pass. I stood where I was. When the movers were done, I walked through the house one last time. The living room looked like a waiting room that had given up. The TV wall had a dark rectangle where the screen used to be. The couch was gone, and the floor showed the dents where it had sat for 2 years. The den was empty except for my dad's recliner, which I had decided to leave. He hadn't done anything wrong except marry a woman who raised 2 children with different values and then watched one of them repeat the pattern. My mother caught my arm at the front door. She said, "Your father is going to be upset about this." I said, "Tell him to call me when he wants to talk about it." She said, "You know this isn't just about a laptop." I said, "I know. That's actually the whole point." I drove back to my apartment and spent the rest of the afternoon setting up the living room with the furniture I had just retrieved. The TV looked good on the wall above the fireplace. The couch fit perfectly in the space I had been leaving open for it. I ordered pizza and sat in a room that was finally, completely mine, and I felt something I did not have a word for. It was not happiness exactly. It was more like being correctly sized, like for the first time in a long time I was exactly as large as I was supposed to be and nothing extra was pressing in from the edges. On Monday, I submitted my resignation to my current employer. 4 weeks notice, clean and professional. My team lead was surprised but gracious. HR processed the paperwork within 24 hours. I did not post about any of it. I did not tell my friends. I just did it. My brother called me Wednesday night. He sounded different. Not apologetic, not quite, but quieter. He said, "I heard you put in your notice." I said, "Word travels fast." He said, "Dad wants to know if you're okay." I thought about that for a second. I said, "I'm better than I've been in a long time." He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "Where are you going?" I told him the company name. The silence that followed lasted long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. Then he said, "Meridian? You're going to Meridian?" I said, "Senior infrastructure role, full remote, better package." He said, "Ryan, Meridian is your current company's biggest competitor. You know that." I said, "I know." He said, "Dad has clients who work with your current company. This could affect his consulting work." I said, "I know." Another long pause. Then he said, "You're doing this on purpose." I said, "I'm doing this because it's the best career opportunity I've been offered. Whether it has other effects is not my responsibility to manage." He hung up. My dad called the next morning. I let it ring, made my coffee, sat in the quiet for a minute, and then called him back. He answered on the first ring, which meant he had been waiting. He said, "I hear you made some decisions this week." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "The move to Meridian." He said it carefully, the way you say something you've been rehearsing. "I need you to understand the position that puts me in." I said, "Dad, I need you to understand the position I was in on Saturday when your daughter-in-law destroyed my work equipment and your son told me I could just buy another one." He was quiet. I said, "Nobody called me the next day. Nobody texted. Not one person in that house said, 'I'm sorry this happened to you, Ryan.' Not one." He said, "I didn't know she had ruined your equipment." I said, "You knew something had happened. You knew I left without saying goodbye. You didn't ask." He didn't have an answer for that. I said, "I love you. I'm not doing this to hurt you. But I am going to stop making myself smaller so that other people don't have to feel uncomfortable about how they treat me. That's not a threat. That's just who I'm going to be from now on." He said, "Son." Just that, just the word, the way fathers say it when they don't have anything else. I said, "I'll talk to you soon." I hung up first, which I had never done with my father in my life. It felt like stepping off a curb I had been standing on for 30 years. The Meridian announcement went out on LinkedIn 2 weeks later, when my onboarding was confirmed. Senior Infrastructure Engineer, Meridian Systems, joining the Cloud Security Division. I kept the post short. Just the facts, a sentence about being excited for the new challenge, the standard language. Nothing dramatic. My phone started moving within an hour. Old classmates. Former coworkers. A professor from my undergrad who had written me a recommendation 6 years ago. Recruiters I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly remembering I existed. I answered the ones I wanted to answer and let the rest sit. The ones I did not answer were from my family. My brother sent a long message, 2 paragraphs, starting with, "I think we got off on the wrong foot," and ending with, "The furniture thing was extreme." I read it twice and did not respond. My sister-in-law sent one line, "You've made your point." My mother sent something that took me a long time to sit with. She wrote that she knew she hadn't handled Saturday right, that she had gotten so used to keeping the peace that she had forgotten what peace was supposed to be protecting. That one, I did respond to. I told her I appreciated her saying it. I told her I wasn't gone, I was just different now, and different was going to take some adjusting on both sides. She sent back a single heart and nothing else, and that felt honest in a way I could respect. My dad did not message me. He called 3 weeks after the LinkedIn post. Not to argue, not to ask me to undo anything. He said, "I'm proud of you. I should have said that on the phone the other week, and I didn't because I was scared. I don't always say the right thing at the right time. But I am. I'm proud of you." I said, "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." We talked for 40 minutes after that. About his back, about the water heater we had installed together, about a baseball game he had watched the night before. We talked like two people who had cleared something out of the room between them and were finally able to see each other again. I do not know what my brother and his wife have done about furniture. I have not asked and no one has told me. I imagine they found something. People always do when they have no other option. I know that my sister-in-law is still at the house. I know my brother is still not working full-time, not really. I know my mother still makes too much food for dinner and probably still worries about everyone at the table except herself. Some things do not change. You do not fix a family by withdrawing one load-bearing wall, you just stop being the wall. What I know about myself now is this. I spent a long time believing that being needed was the same as being valued. I confused the two so completely that I built my entire relationship with my family around being useful, being reliable, being the one who showed up with the right tool at the right moment. And somewhere in all of that, I forgot to ask whether they would do the same for me. The answer, when I finally stopped performing long enough to see it clearly, was sitting in a kitchen on a Saturday afternoon, staring at a ruined machine and shrugging. My name is Ryan Cole, and I am 31 years old, and I have never in my life felt more like myself than I do right now, sitting in an apartment full of furniture that is mine, working a job that respects my time, watching a city I chose move through the window without needing anything from me that I am not prepared to give. I did not leave my family. I left the version of myself who believed that love had to be earned by making yourself invisible. That version served its purpose. I don't need it anymore. The last message I got from my brother came on a Tuesday night, just a week ago. It said, "I want to apologize, no setup, no excuses, just that." I sat with it for a long time before I wrote back. I wrote, "I'm listening, whenever you're ready to talk." And I meant it. But I put my phone face down on the table afterward and I finished my dinner and I watched the sun go down over the buildings across the street and I did not check for his response until the next morning. Not because I was being cruel. Because for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid of what would happen if I made someone wait. That is the thing no one tells you about finally holding your own ground. It is not loud, it does not announce itself. It just feels like having enough space to breathe and wondering, in a quiet and serious way, why you went so long without it.